Welcome, everyone. We are very pleased that you've joined us for tonight's Tulane Family webinar on supporting your student through academic planning and course registration. For the most part, we would anticipate that the folks joining us this evening are parents of incoming first-year students. This is the first topic in our series of webinars for families of new entering first-year students. So we're delighted that you've joined us. There's really strong interest in this topic, as we anticipated there would be. So we are really grateful that you've joined us tonight. I want to go over briefly just some basics about how we, the procedures that we use for our webinars. So my name is Penny Wyatt. I am the Director of Family Programs here at Tulane, and it's my office that sends the family e-newsletters and manages this webinar series with support and help from a wide variety of wonderful colleagues across our campus. So the way that we do our webinars is that your microphones are muted and the chat is disabled in this Zoom webinar format. We ask that you hold your questions until we prompt you to type them in. And when it's time to do that, I'll let you know, and you use the Q&A feature in the controls on your screen to submit the questions. We have tried very hard to anticipate all your questions, so we want you to kind of relax and listen and take in the information before you start to ask any questions. We also get feedback and analyze our webinars after we do them, and we try to refine them every new season. So we also provide the link to the video recording of the webinar in a few days in the archive on the Family Programs website. So that's at familiesplural.tulane.edu /webinars-tutorials. You'll find it there under the Communication tab. So we always want you to have access to these, even if you signed up at first and you couldn't stay for the whole program, or it turns out that the date and time didn't work for you. We know that we've got families on lots of different time zones all over the world, and so we want to make these accessible to you in case you can't join live. So keep that in mind for future topics. So I am going to turn things over to my colleagues now, and we're going to start this topic, which again is supporting your student through academic planning and course registration. I'll turn things over to Heather.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to start by giving you a little framework for the purpose of this webinar. As Penny has given us some great overview, this is really focused on new first-year student parents, and we're really here to make sure that you know what to expect during the June registration process, how to help support your students through registration and advising appointments that will happen this summer, and make sure that you can do the piece that you can do as a partner to support them through that while giving them over kind of the wheel to make some of their own decisions and build their own academic plan as they move forward. Moving on to my own introduction. My name is Heather Cooper, and I am the Associate Director of Student Engagement in College Advising. I'm really happy to be here. I have about 10 years of experience here at Tulane as an advisor, as the Assistant Director, and now the Associate Director to ensure that our students and our parents are in the loop on the things that they need. Sarah?
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Berger. I'm a senior coach, advisor, and training specialist here with the advising office and the success team, the student success team. So I've been with this division of Tulane for the past couple of years, but previously had worked with the service learning office. So it's great to be here.
All right, to run through the objectives of this evening. First, we're going to talk a little bit about our advising model within Newcomb-Tulane College, where all the undergraduates are kind of reside. We'll also talk about the registration overview to give you a sense of what to expect from the registration process, what a June appointment will look like for your student during the appointment, and what objectives we have for your students during that time. We'll give a little overview of what our core curriculum is, but also how major exploration kind of dovetails with our core. We'll talk a little bit about what a typical first semester schedule looks like, so you kind of know what to expect and how to help frame that with your student. And of course, how you can support your student and the following resources that will help support all of you as you kind of embark on this journey at Tulane into the first year at college.
All right, so to share a little bit about our advising model at Tulane. So we have a tiered approach to advising here and just really multiple levels of support for our students. And the central point of that support is the Newcomb-Tulane College Advisor. All students at Tulane, regardless of their major or their year, have a Newcomb-Tulane College Advisor here. And so that's who they meet with from the very beginning and who they'll continue to check in with at least once a semester on general degree progress, and branching out from there to multiple layers of support. Now, once they do choose a primary major or maybe even a secondary major, they'll work with faculty advisors in their department as well. So they'll have, for example, if they're a psychology major, they'll have a psychology professor also that they meet with on a regular basis for department-specific questions, and of course, eventually professional development and looking forward into their post-grad experience. We also have a team of pre-professional advisors that work specifically with students that are pre-med, pre-nursing, pre-law, so very specific pre-professional tracks. And I think that's a really great resource for students, right? Because they have very particular questions about those next steps. And so we work very closely with that team as well. So that's kind of the first three, but there's also many other layers of support. There's fellowship advising. We have career coaching for students to brush up on their professional materials and skills, study abroad advisors, and success coaches who specialize in helping with overall organizational skills, motivational strategies, study habits. So we really do have a multiple offices working in different ways to help support our undergraduate students. So, and we all work as a team. So to speak a little bit more about the role of academic advising, about college advising specifically. So our college advisors work with students to select their courses. And that's usually the first thing on a student's mind when they're starting out is, what is my schedule going to look like? How is that going to start? What are the courses that I'm going to put together for a successful first semester? So that's what they're going to work on with their college advisor, and how do those courses fit in to an overall academic plan or a degree plan? So college advisors are going to help students stay on track with, what are those major boxes to check off in terms of the core curriculum, but also how can we start making inroads with possible majors and minors of interest? And what about, seeing if I can still take an exploratory course in X subject? Can I do that, and will it still move me forward in my degree progress? Right. So there's lots of things that you can discuss with your NTC college advisor. A lot of our students that come here have multiple interests. So what if they start out in one discipline and decide that they want to change majors or change schools? So that's what your college advisor is here for as well, to help you navigate those changes. Also, our office will work with students to help understand any kind of policies or procedures, which is nobody's favorite thing, but important to understand and important to be able to unravel that. So we're here as a resource for students as they navigate that. Also, if things come up where students need to take a withdrawal or leave of absence, they would go to their academic advisor for that, as well as, pre-professional planning and preparation. So, of course, this list is not exhaustive. Any college advisor will tell you there are just a multitude of topics to cover and discuss with students, but this is just kind of a nice snapshot that captures some of the primary pieces that we cover.
Thanks, Sarah. So, registration overview. What will be happening? What's happening right now for your students? Right now, within the last few days, your student has received a link to schedule an appointment that was sent through admissions. That link has some to-do items and some tasks and some reminders in it, and it's good and important information. That information also lives online, so you do not have to hound your student for their email to find it. It's on our incoming student website. So if you just go to advising.tulane.edu hold on, I just had it. I'm sorry, /advising/incoming. You will see some great resources there, but also the link to make an appointment for this June. Appointments are available from June 1st all the way through June 30th. And just to kind of explain the process a little, advisors will meet one-on-one with the students during these appointments. Generally, we expect the appointments to be about 30 minutes long. They will get a link to the appointment 24 hours ahead of their appointment time. They will also get a confirmation email with the list of things to do that's been reiterated in a few different spaces the moment they make their appointment. So if they're missing any emails, it might be that they're in the junk folders or their spam. Sometimes the Tulane email has a pre-setting on it that has a focused area and an other area. I find lots of little gems in my other area. So just navigating, it's always going to be through that Tulane email. So while it's not living on one of these slides, one of the best ways to support your student or to get them to get used to incorporating their Tulane email into their daily practice of keeping up to date with their school communications. That's definitely where most of us will be sending things to. These appointments are one-on-one for the students. We don't have a ton of time with students, and we want to make sure that they are in the driver's seats. Parents, we love you as partners, but we cannot have you in these appointments. If you really feel that you need some time sitting down with advising after that, or maybe with one of us in leadership, we're happy to schedule something with you separately from this registration appointment. What should your student do and be preparing for before the meeting? There are a number of modules that have been laid out by our first year experience team. These have been in the works for months, and they've started out this May for the first time. So we're really excited that students have these resources. There is an advising and registration module in Canvas, which is our online learning management system that Tulane uses for not just these modules and incoming students, but for all of their classes that they'll take while here on campus as well. So part of kind of engaging the module will also get them ready in a sense for their classes in the fall. There's something called a registration worksheet. I don't know if students know what worksheets are anymore, but I certainly do. For us, that's just an online form that gives us information about their interest today, in their academic interest today. We all know that a lot of them filled out their admissions work and their admissions interests long ago, back in junior or early senior year. And so this gives us a snapshot of where students are today in their academic journey, and will allow us to update our system with those more current interests, as well as give them some good information related to those interests and prepare for their appointments. So it is really helpful for us to get this information prior to the appointment, so each of our advisors can spend time preparing for your student's appointment and thinking about what suggestions that student might need within the appointment time. So that's a really important piece. I'd say those top two are the biggest ones on my list. Some students who are very interested in foreign language can fill out the foreign language placement. There are a couple different things about foreign language that would need to be discussed during our appointment. But if anyone needs to find that link, it's in those modules, and there's lots of good information in the modules as well. The other great thing that would help our appointments move efficiently and really, again, keep that student in the driver's seat, which is our goal, is really for them to build a practice planner. Our scheduling system, and I'll show you an example a little bit later in this talk, has a way in which basically students can build a schedule that they're imagining for themselves. We'll look over that with them in our appointment and help them make adjustments according to course availability or conflicts, or actually that curriculum needs this class, not that class, but I see why you chose it, that kind of thing. So we'll have something to bounce off of. And this is really important, I think, to the long-term advising relationship as well, that students come to appointments with something to share that we can kind of work with them on. We really view this as a partnership with students. And so this is kind of the piece that would really help us in working with them. And part of that is also just being able to log in to the class schedule. The website is just classschedule.tulane.edu, but it's called our schedule of classes. And this is where they will do all of their registration activity for the next 4 years or beyond. So being able to log into it, not getting locked out of it, knowing their passwords, those are all tips and tricks that, again, shouldn't be overlooked. So kind of in the same vein here, during the appointments, what to expect. So first and foremost, they need to book their advising appointment. Again, that's on the incoming student page or in an email in their email. Something to note, and I imagine you'll have questions about, students have been pre-registered into some classes. This pre-registration will look different for different students. The registrar manages this process for us, and this helps us to facilitate the learning process a little bit, get students in a few classes that will be important to their current curriculum interest, and allow our enrollment management kind of gurus in the registrar's office in Gibson Hall to really kind of see how many, make sure they know they have enough seats for all the different curriculum interests of the incoming class. So when a student goes to their schedule right now, they might see that it says they're already in 3 credits or even 12 credits if they say if they're interested in something like architecture or business that has a bit of a heavier, more structured course delineation. But that pre-registration is completely normal and completely changeable. We will look at the pre-registration courses with students, talk to them about their current interests, and we will help determine with them whether or not those are good classes for them or not so good based on kind of as we get more information from them in our live appointment. Some parents and students are asking lots of questions about course availability this time of year. During June is kind of a special case scenario that doesn't really repeat itself during our usual kind of fall and spring registration seasons each semester. Course availability during June is actually kind of artificially brought down for certain high demand classes like your chemistry or your calculus or even TIDES by the registrar's office to kind of help make sure that we open up seats evenly throughout the month of June, little by little. So your student will only have access to the classes that have available seats on the day and the day of their appointment. After that, they can do registration changes in July when registration will open up for all of the rest of the summer. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well, but I want you to know that course availability in some classes will be kind of capped artificially, and then that will open up over the course of June. So it doesn't really matter if your student has a late June appointment versus an early June appointment. To us, those appointments are going to generally look the same, and the registrar kind of holding the caps on that is really the way that they make sure that there's some equity across the month of June. The registration that your student has access to, their system, adding and dropping classes, is during June only, is only available during the 24 hours of their appointment. So generally, the morning of their appointment, advisors will open up their registration, and that will automatically close at midnight the next night, or the midnight the day of that appointment. If your student misses the appointment or has to change the appointment, we'll kind of cross that road when we come to it. But we really encourage them to try to come to the appointment that they've made, or make the change early enough in the month to reschedule within the month as well. First year students are really, really worried about what they have to have. They feel like they have to finish the entire curriculum or get as much out of the way as possible. And a lot of that comes from goodwill from our previous experiences in college. And I'm speaking to you parents who maybe had very specific structured things that they had to take. Now, if you're an engineering student or a biomedical engineering student or biochem or something like that, there are going to be more structured classes. But all first year students need the same thing on their fall schedule, which is a first year seminar. Usually that's a TIDES class, which is a 1 credit kind of once a week class in a small class environment with fun professors around fun topics, usually with some outings into the community and things like that to get to know one another, a professor, and the city of New Orleans all at once. If your student happens to be admitted as an honors student, they will also have the option to join something called a colloquium class, which is a very similar experience as the TIDES class. So you might see either of those, TIDES or colloquium, on your student's schedule. The only other thing that might be required, like I mentioned, like an engineering schedule, there are things that have sequential classes that kind of are really required in order to stay on track from day one. Not a lot of majors have this, but Chemistry 1, for example, is only offered in the fall. You can't just start chemistry in the spring. You have to start Chemistry 1 in the fall and do Chemistry 2 in the spring. So if a student wants to do something that requires chemistry and then later builds into orgo and that later it builds into physics, then they probably need to get started on that in their first semester and not wait. But that's what we're here for during the appointment. Most students will need 15 to 18 credits. That's our goal during the 30-minute appointment. And that could be anywhere from 4 to 5 classes. Most of our lectures are 3-credit classes. Some of our sciences with labs or English writing classes, those might be, or early language classes are 4 credits. So anywhere from 4 to 5 classes will generally land us at that 15 to 18 credits. If you do the math over 8 semesters, that equals about 122 credits, which is the total number of credits every student will need for their degree. Like I mentioned, July 1st, registration reopens, wide open, not just one day, it's open for the rest of the summer. And the bottom of this slide shows a link to our academic calendar. That is helpful just to see when the last day to add is, which is actually about 2 weeks into the beginning of the semester. First date to drop or last date to drop a class without any record is 4 weeks into the semester. So while I don't want students making a lot of changes at the beginning of the semester after the first week, it's completely normal from July 1st to later in the first week of the classes to make changes.
All right, so shifting a little bit to talk about the core curriculum and major exploration. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of students that have multiple interests, and Tulane really prides itself on having the flexibility that we build into our core curriculum. And this is really helpful to keep in mind when you're thinking about scheduling first semester classes, because almost absolutely any course that a student takes is going to be fulfilling some piece of those curriculum requirements. I like to explain the curriculum requirements like buckets. We've got, your formal reasoning, which is your math. You've got your lab science. You've got your social sciences. You've got your history. And there are in most cases, hundreds of classes that are going to check that box. And so what that means is that each student has a lot of flexibility and autonomy really in how they want to go about fulfilling those requirements. And so that's just a nice framework to kind of take so I think it's a lot of the pressure out of the first semester course selection, because you do have so many options there. A lot of majors at Tulane are super flexible and can allow for multiple majors, especially if you're thinking about majors within the School of Liberal Arts. To some extent, also within some of the majors in the School of Architecture, Public Health, and even it's not uncommon for students to hold a primary major, for example, in the School of Science and Engineering, and have a secondary major in the School of Liberal Arts. It's very common for students to bridge schools in their curriculum. Of course, most of them would never dream of it in their first semester. They would begin thinking, oh, this is the only time that I'll only ever have time for this one major. But then when they start to build their confidence and their trajectory as a student and really get to know who they are academically and more what they want out of their degree, frankly, they'll start to, it opens up for them and they start to see that there's room for that. Like Heather said earlier, there's a rush to think that they have to fit everything in the first semester, but it really is just the beginning. You know, when we're advising students in the beginning, we always say, you know, let's start with the most structured major interest and go from there. So what does that mean? You know, if we know that you have an interest in the science or the pre-medical field, you know that you're going to take General Chemistry 1 and the lab. But that is only 4 credits, and you're wanting to build a schedule of 15 to 18 credits. And so you kind of start with the pieces that fit and then start to build on top of there. Again, there is time to adjust that schedule, even though it will close on midnight of the day of these students' June appointments. On July 1st, it opens, and they really have about 6 weeks until, you know, until the semester really gets going to make adjustments. So it feels final somehow, but it's not. There's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of time for things to shift. No doubt a lot of students are going to want to, maybe they have an older sibling at Tulane or older friends that they knew, they want to get them to weigh in. Who's your favorite professor? Who's your favorite, you know, what's your favorite subject area? So even if they get some information that they want to put into action, there's still time to do that too, right? Even if it happens after their June advising appointment. And then let's see, the last point is just that registration is open until the end of the day of that appointment. And I think students are going to be surprised that after they do the legwork of putting an initial planner together and really thinking about, you know, what their interests are and meeting with their advisor, it's going to all really come together really nicely by the end of that appointment.
So to start with a typical first semester schedule, there is nothing typical, but especially with all of the different directions our students can go and the variety of interests our students have. But I wanted to show a slide that showed just kind of what this planner looked like that I mentioned earlier. This is basically the scratch paper that students can build using the schedule of classes. Anytime they add a class to their planner, it's just adding, it's like an Amazon shopping cart, right? It is not something they're purchasing, they're not registering just because they push the word add. They're just really adding it to what's called a cart. And then they're going to this page, which is their planner, to show what their typical schedule is. So it might be when they show to the appointment, they already have maybe that first little class at 8 a.m. in purple, which is in this case, Math 1210, and which is Calculus 1. They might have said, I'm interested in business. So the system put them in the math class, which is important for business, economics, econ 1010, that little red square. And then it left the rest to the student. Then the student comes into the appointment. We say, yeah, you do need math. You do need economics. Those are good classes for you to have for a business curriculum. Now let's keep building this. And the student opted to also look, in this case, into music and history. So when we think about that core curriculum that Sarah just walked us through, we have things just by building out classes around their major interest and their interest. The student wants to look a little bit into music. The student loves European history. And already had a tides chosen because their sister told them that this was the coolest professor ever. So they already had all this together. And just by having a little bit of different variety, they're actually already covering core curriculum requirements. The math class here will cover what's called formal reasoning requirement. The economics will cover one of their 2 social and behavioral classes required. The music class will cover their arts and their history class. Their arts and aesthetic and creative arts class. And their history class will cover a textual and historical requirement, one of 2. So first semester, they can come in really strong and want to make sure they're checking boxes. But honestly, if they just kind of trust the process, they're going to end up with checking off boxes. It's impossible to take a class that doesn't move them forward in their core curriculum. Now, later on, as a junior or senior, as we get toward graduation, if a student is missing a history class or a social science class or an arts class or lab science, they usually avoid those more than they avoid the art classes. That's when we bring them in and say, hey, we got to talk about what's your plan for finishing these remaining classes. So I don't want you or your student to worry that these aren't going to get covered eventually. Again, at minimum, if your student's planning on being here for 4 full years, they have 8 semesters to work with. So I'm very confident that we will get them to the finish line. But for this appointment and for this summer and for June, we just want to set them up for a good balanced semester in the fall. This is a 17 credit semester. Again, 15 is good, 17 is fine. Most students will be in that 15, 16 range before tides because of a 4 credit math class in this case, or language class. Add a tides on, then you're at 17 credits. The minimum full-time for a student is 12 credits. I never recommend starting with 12. 12 is the minimum full-time required for full-time enrollment, for scholarships, for lots of different things that students need, athletic eligibility, but we always want to start students around 15. 16, because that'll give them some flexibility if they do get in trouble 3-4 weeks into the semester and they're just not doing well in one of their classes, or the transition to college is a little bit more difficult than they anticipated. We want to make sure that they have a little flexibility to pull back. I'm not worried about somebody earning 12 credits in a semester, especially their first semester. There's lots of time to make up those credits, but I don't want them to start at 12 credits because I think that will make them stuck if they do need to drop anything else or something becomes more difficult or different than they expected. So 15, 16 credits, great place to start. Academic calendar shows you the deadlines for adding and dropping. There's still time to make changes, and students do make changes. It's a little different than high school. You can't, we don't want people to walk away from all their classes, but we also don't want them to drown. My main thing for a typical first semester that makes sure the students are doing well is there's challenge, but they aren't underwater. They're able to kind of hold their head above water and make it work and learn something from the process. This is a random slide in conjunction to that, but just to shift a little bit to some of those things that I know parents often ask about and students, but what about that pre-matriculation credit, that credit that students may have earned or been promised during high school, college classes that they may have taken, dual enrollment programs that they may have engaged in. There's a couple different things that students can do to report that to us. One is that registration worksheet I mentioned earlier. There's space for them to tell us what credits they think they might get. Now, AP, IB, A-level tests have pretty strong structured equivalencies. You earn a 4 or 5 on your AP test, you get credit for this class. IB credits, we only take higher level tests not lower level, not the standard level test. And that's important distinction for students. But either way, they report these things so that we know, okay, you actually have credit for that calculus class. So you may or may not need to retake that credit. Now, if they want to be a math major and want to retake the credit because they want to have a solid foundation, that's a conversation we can have. But just getting those credits to here and kind of knowing what students have a background in and what credits they might be expecting is really important. So first and foremost, are there plenty of resources on that incoming student website that I mentioned earlier on the advising website to see what equivalencies they might expect. They need to make sure that they've sent the main to-do item this summer for advising is to make sure they've sent all of their scores to advising. Usually students will see those popping up in their records sometime in the month of July as our computer system kind of uploads them all. They need to send all scores. They do not need to sort through if they got credit or didn't, or earned a 4 or 5 on the AP or did not. Just send them all. Our computer system will post the credit that they earned. And that will help us with our advising appointments moving forward. Dual enrollment or pre-Tulane, pre-matriculation. Matriculation is the moment they accept coming to Tulane. Your student has actually already matriculated to Tulane. So if your student is planning a summer class, they should probably chat with us if they think that their class is not going to or might need to transfer as a particular thing. Some of your students are doing summer classes. The main thing with our transfer credit process is that it's a 4-year school and not a community college. So that's an important piece. But anybody who's already taken that college class before accepting their May 1st kind of deadline and becoming a full-fledged Tulane student, they can fill out something on our transfer credit form that tells us all about their pre-matriculation credit, and that will get evaluated as to whether or not it meets the requirement that they think it will meet. They can begin filling out those forms as soon as today. And some of those have already started coming in. We look at those, we get things that we need to the departments, and evaluate each thing credit by credit to see what things need to post to the student's record. So just help the student will need to help them make sure they need to order these things and report these things. That's the most important part. You don't have to do all the work of making sure it transfers.
All right, so a little bit about how you can support your student through this process of getting them all set up for success with their schedule. So as they're completing their registration worksheet and thinking about foreign language placement, there's a place for them to indicate what are the fields of study that they're interested in and subjects that they're curious about. So you know them well too. You can help them kind of reflect on what they will enjoy and what will be good at, what they will excel in, just based on their prior experience, what they've done in high school or in extracurricular programs or other interests, other ways that they've engaged with material that they want to build on. Or maybe things that they don't know as much about, but they know that they want to dig into. So helping them to just reflect and identify those things. Also doing some research about majors and minors prior to appointments. There's just a whole world, obviously, of online research about different career paths, different majors, different disciplines. But also sometimes our best resources are just the people that we know. So different family members and friends that have, what have they studied in the past, or what are some of the career paths that they've taken? Sometimes I think that can be really helpful for students too, just to hear some first-person experience about what's worked for other people. You can also have conversations with your student about academic plans that might require additional time or expense. So really thinking about summer school. So summer is a time that a lot of students use in a lot of different ways, but to catch up on coursework, if they change trajectories and they want to cram a couple of chemistry classes in there, or they might be deciding that they want to go abroad. And that's an additional expense too. Sometimes students can work studying abroad into their academic year. And in fact, that's probably the more common route, that students will go abroad for a full semester. But some students say, I don't want to take time away from my campus life. I want to do this over the summer. If they're interested in studying a foreign language, maybe they want to go abroad to a country that speaks the target language. And, maybe they have dreams of interning with a particular company in a certain city or another country. So you can get kind of creative too with your student about, ideas and dreams for the future. And just reminding your students to be patient and flexible with themselves. I couldn't tell you the amount of times that students have admitted with full, just being completely disheartened and dismayed that they don't know what they want to do with the rest of their lives. And I'm thinking, I don't know very many students that know what they want to do for the rest of their lives as a freshman in college, right? And that is what a lot of this time is used for, is to hone in on those particularities. So to show themselves grace and patience and flexibility. And just to remind them that not only do they have, obviously, the support of their family and friends at home, but they have an amazing team of advisors here at Tulane and student support workers. And that's our whole job, is just to make sure that students are where they need to be and that they get their questions answered and get connected to the resources that are going to help them thrive. Just as a quick reminder, these are some resources that I think will be really helpful to students, to parents. So bookmark these, or hopefully your students are bookmarking these in their browsers. The academic calendar, so Heather mentioned that earlier, but that's got a lot of your important deadlines that you'll want to keep tabs on. When's the last day to add a class, drop a class, withdraw? When are the school holidays, things like that. Class schedule, of course. Class schedule number one. Everybody check out classschedule.tulane.edu, because that's where students make their schedules, just literally. They log in, and that is exactly where they add and drop classes. So the more familiar they can be with that resource, the better. The catalog, which has every single major, every single minor, and actually all of our graduate programs too. So that's a great resource. Our website, which is where you can find out how to connect with advising through one-on-one appointments, and a myriad of other ways that you can connect with our office. And then the FERPA release form, which is the Federal Privacy Act, for students. So if students want to submit that to allow for their parents or anyone else to view their educational records, that is what they would have to submit. So there's a link there to that as well. And I just want to thank you all for being here. We would love to take some time to answer any and all questions that you have for us.
So, families, this is your time to type in those questions. You have been excellent at holding off on typing in any questions until we prompted you. So you get an A+ already. So this really does help us kind of be more efficient. We know that you've heard everything first before you start asking questions. So the first one that I will pose to Sarah and Heather is that their student currently has hold labeled on, advisor registration hold on their Gibson portal. What does that mean, and how does it get resolved?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. I had it in the back of my head during one of these slides, and it just didn't feel like the right time to bring it up. So I figured somebody would come in. So thank you, Catherine Brown, for that. So the hold is normal, completely normal. It is the way in which we manage June advising and registration, but in order to open up registration for just that day, we essentially put the advisor hold as kind of as a layer to our appointment. We don't just open all registration to all students. We have to have these one-on-one appointments in order to make sure that the student's registration can be open and that they've gotten some guidance. We actually are not a mandatory advising office generally, but for this moment, we find that it is absolutely integral. So this hold is really just kind of a pause button on the registration process during June to open it and close it just for the day of registration. I wish our schedule of classes didn't just say June 1st, because I know people have also had questions about thinking that their registration will open June 1st. That's when registration begins for students, but that may or may not be when it will begin for your student. Your student's registration will open the day that they have an appointment.
Okay, the next question is, even though a student majoring in finance still has to take statistics for scientists and business statistics, regardless of an AP stat score, will that student majoring in finance get any college credit if he gets a 4+ on the AP statistics?
That one's a tricky one just because we have 2 stats classes. One is Intro to Probability and Stats, and one is Stats for Scientists. The student that you're speaking of with AP Stats will always get credit for Intro, but not for Stats for Scientists. Tulane sees these classes as the equivalents. So we have to remove the AP credit in order for the degree to focus in on the Stats for Scientists. So for this particular example, the answer would be no. They would not get credit for the AP Stats if the student sticks with business. On the other hand, if they are a liberal arts major and they have AP Stats, completely usable in other curriculums, but business is very specific about requiring calculus and stats for scientists for their majors.
The next question is, I noticed some of the classes show writing tier 1 under attributes. Does that cover the tier 1 writing requirement?
I can take that question. Yes, it does. So the attributes is exactly, so that's right. You picked up right. The attributes will list exactly what requirements that course will fulfill. And so if the course has the attribute tier 1 writing, then that is a tier 1 writing course. Absolutely.
Is the language assessment required for a beginning language course?
I can take that. If you're starting on a brand new foreign language, no, you don't need to take a foreign language assessment. You would just register for the 1010 course. That's if and only if you've never taken that language before. If you've studied it and you want to continue studying it, that's when you take the language placement test.
Regarding, let's see, the next question. Regarding AP scores that will come out in July, how will they select core classes without knowing these scores now when they're doing their appointments in June?
Yeah, they usually just self-report on a confidence scale. Most students will have a sense of how they did and will kind of build a schedule from that. A lot of times, if they register for the class that they later get credit in, what we do, we ask them to sign up for the class like, hey, if you're not sure you have psych credit, let's get you in that psych class now. If in July you end up getting credit and want to move into a different type of psych class and not retake something you already have credit for, that's what the opportunity for changing your schedule in July will offer.
Should they send in their AP scores now from past years and then update when this May's scores come in? Or should they just wait and submit them all?
I'd say they could do either. I think it's fine to do it all at once. I don't believe the scores for the May test will show up until July. Sometimes students have AP scores in the system when they meet with us, but we will take we'll believe them. If they tell us they got a 4 or 5 on calculus, then we will proceed with a schedule as such and build from there.
Where does one find the modules to complete in order to make the June appointments and the deadline for that and the link?
I don't know, Sarah, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, you can find that in a couple of places. So the modules themselves are on Canvas, which is our learning management system that all students use here on campus, so that they can find it there. Links to make the June appointment deadline, that is all also found in email communications that have gone out to students and to parents, as well as on the advising website under the section for incoming students.
And they can find Canvas if they log into Gibson online, which is their their sort of meta portal, to find a lot of different systems and resources and administrative support kind of functions, so they can access Canvas through Gibson.
Yes, thank you.
Let's see. So next question. Can credits that transfer in count towards the core curriculum requirements? In other words, could an AP microeconomics course count towards the social and behavior sciences core requirement?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in some cases, AP credits can fulfill requirements. Only in the case of writing requirement, formal reasoning requirement, also known as math, and foreign language requirements. But in the case of the social behavioral sciences, no. If the student scores a high enough AP score on microeconomics, they will still get 3 elective credits for giving them credit for introduction to microeconomics, but it will not be fulfilling the social behavioral sciences requirement.
The way I think about the core curriculum in this case is there's a proficiency bucket. Proficiency is, we're not giving you a degree until we know you can write at a certain level, reason at a certain level, and do language at a certain level. And those proficiency requirements generally allow for AP credit. The other set of requirements are distribution requirements. So this is Tulane's faculty way of saying, we want to make sure all of our graduates have taken college level courses in a variety of areas, from sciences to arts to social science and so forth. So in the example that you've given about AP credit, no, the AP credit doesn't cover distribution, but student takes a summer class or did a dual enrollment class, gets approved as a class that would be social behavioral here. That's considered approval at a college level class. And when it transfers in as transfer credit, those can do distribution requirements. So just remember, AP has a limited function in the core, but it can cover things within the major. Transfer credit usually has a lot more flexibility than AP.
So this next parent might have answered their own question. The question is, do summer community college courses taken outside of New Orleans count for credit? Who can we contact to find out more about this? Is it the transfer credit specialist? So I think this person has already been perusing the website very carefully.
It is. That person is the best person to make an appointment with. They can, and again, we'd have to get into the nitty-gritty to know in your particular situation, to make sure we're asking the right questions. But generally, the transfer credit specialist can answer this. If it's a community college taken this summer, that is a moment for pause. If it was taken in previous semesters or summers, then it would be something that the student would report in their pre-matriculation form that is on the transfer credit website. I can try to drop that in the chat for you, Penny, too. That's helpful.
Or you can send it to me. I'll send it. I will be sending everybody a follow-up email with some of these links that have been mentioned, so that you couldn't capture them, from the screen when we were going through the slides. You'll have easy access to that. So the next question is, if my child has already selected their major, when can they have an appointment with their major advisor? Can this be done before the registration process closes?
I generally don't recommend, I generally don't know that adding the major advisor or major contact to prior to the appointment is very necessary. While we don't advise all the way through the upper echelons of the major, we definitely are really good at getting people started in their majors. So generally that's enough to get started with. That said, every one of our departments will have listed a director of undergraduate studies on their websites. Some are traveling, some are working, some are teaching, some are accessible, some are not. Everybody is always welcome to reach out to their departments with questions. If they're very eager to get connected to their department, absolutely welcome to do that. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. I don't think they're going to miss something if they don't do that prior to the appointment, unless they're really trying to like get out of taking some elementary class or something like that. Getting just general contact with the department should be enough. It won't be called a major advisor at that point because they're not nowhere near declaring their major or getting a major advisor assigned to them.
Heather, will you explain when students do declare their majors? I'm not sure.
When students do?
Yeah.
Yes. So students can declare as soon as they would like in most cases, but we ask students to definitely declare by the end of sophomore year. So usually sophomore year is a good time to start declaring majors. We have all sorts of discussions during first year. And there's a few students who are like, I know I'm business. Well, business is a bad example because they really don't let them declare until they've gotten through some of the intro courses. But if they really want to declare a major and the department doesn't have any restrictions on that, then they can do that as soon as they like. But we usually start hounding them a little bit closer to the end of sophomore year.
We're beginning to run out of time, so I'm going to try to take some of the questions that seem to have for the broadest application to more students, and let you know that some of the questions that have been submitted are the really specific type of questions that a student can ask their advisor in the session. So, so make sure your student is prepared. It's done everything to review everything that's in the module and has some questions already. That's a great place for them to start and a good habit to get into for preparing for their advisor appointments for all 4 years. So one question was that their student didn't receive their schedule appointment yet, their registration appointment. How should they proceed?
So I think I dropped the link to the incoming student website for another person's question. Let me just make sure, and I can drop that in to the chat again, if that's useful. It's just advising.tulane.edu/advising/incoming. And that is the exact same verbiage that they received in their email.
Okay. The next question, is there a pre-vet pre-professional advisor?
Our pre-professional advisors work with all pre-health and allied health professions, including pre-vet and pre-dental.
So the next question is, can you share more about the success coach, how to schedule that time, what else did they do to support students? So I think let's be really brief about that so that we can answer a few more questions. And I will make sure that in the follow-up email, I'll include the success coaching department's website.
Yeah, so success coaching is for students that just want an extra layer of support with their overall approach to academics. So if they need support with organizational skills, time management, motivational, getting in touch with their motivations for their major, those are kind of the more broad topics that success coaching can cover. And students can schedule an appointment with a success coach through the website.
Okay, so I think Heather might have typed this one in, but somebody asked if there was a summer reading project, and there is. And students will hear about that from the first year experience office, and that'll be more information will be included in their series of e-newsletters that are called Navigators. So the students received one of those on May 8th and another on May 15th, and the next one will be June 1. On the first year experience website, there is a place where those are archived, and so parents can see them. And I mentioned that in the parent e-newsletter that I sent last week. So I would just put a plug in for the parent e-newsletters that would assume that everybody here received theirs and read it, or you probably wouldn't have signed up for this webinar. But those will guide you through the summer. We send them more frequently in this time period to, since there is so much to kind of absorb and get to know about Tulane in that high school to college transition. So you have your set of those, and the students have their ones that are called Navigators. And they get those all this summer, and they continue through their whole first year at Tulane to help them in that college adjustment phase. So they'll learn more about the book. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the book off the top of my head, but I'll try to drop that in the follow-up e-newsletter that I'll send you. So I think that we've tried to get through most of those questions, and it is right at 7 o'clock. So we really appreciate your joining us and participating in this. And we're really grateful that you connected with us and you started to see, how our webinars go. We will have another webinar tomorrow night that is about accessibility at Tulane. And so the director of our Goldman Center for Student Accessibility will answer questions about how students can apply for and submit the necessary documentation for any ADA accommodations that they want to request. So that can be very important. And there's some significant differences between accommodations at the K through 12 level versus the college level. So if your student has received accommodations in the past or anticipates that they might need those, if you haven't already carefully read the accessibility website, then I would strongly recommend that you join our webinar tomorrow evening, or can't join us tomorrow because the time's not convenient, then look for that recording when I promote that in the an upcoming parent newsletter. So Sarah or Heather, do you have any last thoughts that you want to mention? I know you shared a lot.
I'm just really excited about meeting all of your students and your energy, and I really appreciate all of you coming out today. I know this can be a really overwhelming time, and there's a lot of pressure on you as parents. There's a lot of pressure on your students. So I would just encourage everybody to trust the process. Orientation goes from now all the way through the beginning of the semester. And honestly, there's support through Newcomb-Tulane College, not just through advising, but through all of our college offices. And as long as your student is connecting to some of the resources on campus, they will figure this out. But we're just really excited that you're here to support them, and we know you're hoping for the best for them and want the best for them, and the best thing you can do is continue to support them in that way. So thank you.
Sarah, any last comments?
I just want to echo what Heather said, and thank you everyone for being here, for your time and commitment, and yeah.
So I will just mention, if you have any questions about this content for, about academic advising and course registration, then you can email advising@tulane.edu. If you have more general questions or want to suggest some topics for future webinars, then you're welcome to email me at families@tulane.edu. We really appreciate your feedback. And so if you want to type in a couple of words to let us know what you thought about this webinar, or you can send that in a separate email. We really value that. A lot of what you might appreciate about what we're offering may have been suggested by a Tulane parent from a few years ago. So it's always a process of continuous quality improvement that we try to engage in. And we've had this partnership, this really strong, wonderful partnership as colleagues between advising and family programs to bring you these webinars, to explain more so that so that you can be a good support for your student. This first time you may be more engaged in supporting them or nudging them, especially we know that this is a difficult time. A lot of students are still in high school right now, and it's a very busy time of high school. They've got a lot of work and celebrations and all kinds of things going on. It's challenging for them to have one foot in their high school world and the other, already in examining everything they're going to do at Tulane. So we know that it takes some extra attention and focus and some time on task. So we certainly understand that is a challenge this month, especially. So we want you to feel supported and feel like you know a little bit more about what the expectations are and what the support is. There is really a lot of support. We all want your students to be successful. So please keep that in mind. Always trust us with that, and know that we want the best for your student, and we are all looking forward to meeting them. So I'm going to close the webinar. Expect an email in a couple of days once we process the webinar video and get that uploaded and everything and collect some of this information. You'll also get a PDF of the webinar slides. And we always put both of those things in the archive online at families.tulane.edu, the recording of the webinar and a link to the slides in case you just want to refresh your memory of a couple of points. You don't want to watch the whole webinar again. So good evening, everyone. Have a great evening and wish your students much success with this next phase of getting ready for Tulane. And we look forward to having you on a future webinar. So thank you to Heather and Sarah, and thank you, parents. Good night.